And for more on the state of Argentina's economy, we're joined by Inaki Martinez Soria. He is an economic strategist and advisor. Welcome to the program. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Sean. Thank you for having me.
Okay, 1 year into Milei's term, and really by any standards, he's achieved some significant success in the last 12 months on the deficit, bringing down what had simply been staggering inflation rates to somewhat under control. Tell us about that a bit and how you think that the average person in Argentina is digesting all this information now, roughly a year and a half into his term.
Well, Sean, as you say, I think we're facing a government that it's not only confident, but also emboldened. After a very difficult year, the administration can start to show some very impressive signs. Inflation has dropped, monthly inflation from a 24 to a 2.7% rate. First fiscal surplus in 16 years. The trade balance surplus 18.9 billion. JP Morgan is confirming that the economy is looking at a V-shaped recovery,
wow,
which is very, very important. Poverty, which initially rise to 54.8% at the start of the government, and the government addresses that not necessarily as a result of their measures, but as a result of a renewed transparency in the way poverty was measured, has now dropped 16 points to 38.9%. So by any measure that one might use, by any possible indicator, the government has had plenty of successes. Now, as you say, the main issue is how is the Argentine people living this in their day-to-day lives? Does this indicator translate in a better quality of life for the Argentines? Well, I think there's a two-pronged response to that. First, the Argentine people has had a very tough year. That is a reality. We've faced a significant recession and a contraction of the economy. This the president had foreseen in his speech. He said that we had a tough time ahead. But now I think that the Argentines, which are very used to the chaos and you know the stumbling, are beginning to enjoy the fruits of stability, and with that ability to predict the future, business is starting to restart, business is starting to boom, and I think that we'll see this recovery going ahead in the next few months. IMF has released its figures. The Argentine economy is expected to grow at 5% this next year, which is surprisingly good.
You know, and Milei also made clear that this was going to be difficult. It was not going to be easy, painful across the board. Now, looking back on his election when he was swinging his chainsaw around, vowing to slash spending, but there really was a method to the madness, if you will. Let's talk about the peso's devaluation and how that is affecting Argentina as well as its neighbors, the way they look at Argentina.
Yes, sure, Sean. The initial devaluation effectively corrected a lag in the prices. Argentina had at one point 18 different prices for the US dollar, which is a reference price for the economy. Everything, even though we transact in pesos, the mind of the people, of the Argentine people, generally stipulates everything, the real costs, in US dollars. So what Milei did was essentially just clearing a price that was already implicit. That devaluation, of course, generated a course effect. The thing is, after that, the government has conducted a crawling peg policy around 2% a month. This has effectively acted as an anchor on inflation, which has now been reduced significantly. But what we're now seeing is the opposite problem. Historically, Argentina has had an issue of going from a very devalued peso to an overvalued peso, and we're having that exact problem now, and there are many ways in which this can be perceived by the general population. One of the most significant is that as the summer comes, hundreds, thousands of Argentines travel abroad, mainly Brazil and Chile, which are our neighboring countries. So there is this sort of uneasy feeling as how long is this going to last? How long will it be until the government is forced to devalue again? And that, of course, there's a danger that it will spill over to inflation and restart inflation again. So this will be a tricky challenge for the government to handle. The government is saying that they are confident because the main Now the main anchor is not necessarily the price of the dollar, but
Right.
the maintenance of the fiscal surplus. So we'll see how it goes.
Inaki, we don't have a whole lot of time, but I'm curious about how investors, international investors, financial markets are responding to Milei's policies. And it's interesting because Milei is doing all this, and he really has very little success within Congress. He is an outsider.
Well, I would divide that answer, Sean, into two parts. Financially, I think that the investors are really supportive of the administration. The Merval, which is sort of the S&P of the Argentine Stock Exchange, has grown over 100% since Milei has entered government, which is a very clear sign of financial expectations, favorable financial expectations for Argentina. What we would call the sort of productive or the real economy investments have been a little bit slower. It is understandable in the sense that we usually promise a lot and then we fall short. So I think investors have been waiting to see if this is sustainable in the longer term. But the government has already, through its large investments incentive scheme, the RIGI, has already received commitments for $12 billion in investments, a mixture of foreign and national investments. But also there are very promising signs in some specific sectors as mining and energy. YPF, which is the state-owned oil company, has recently signed an MOU with several Indian companies, which is expected to bring $30 billion in the next 10 years. So we're seeing some very encouraging signs in that respect.